America's Electric Nazca, Megalithic Marfa, Texas is my new book describing a discovery of Nazca-type lines and geoglyphs in southwest Texas. This video is a compilation of the photographic evidence of these lines taken on a historic flight over the area in April 2016. This discovery starts at Stonehenge, United Kingdom, with the Rosetta discovery of the importance the builders placed on following solstice and equinox around the world, and the amazing connections of all the megalithic sites placed in precise alignment, such as the exact connection of the Great Pyramid in Giza to the center of the altar at Stonehenge that leads directly to North America and the area called Marfa Plateau in Texas. I want to remind folks that the altitude here almost matches that of Machu Picchu, Peru, at 7,650 foot above the sea level, and like Nazca receives minimal rainfall, approximately 12 inches a year. Fort Davis, Marfa, and Alpine, Texas form an almost perfect isosceles triangle. I chose to stay in Alpine due to ease and amenities not available in Marfa. The flight plan at 10,000 foot ceiling is done in a helicopter, but I would suggest tourism in a fixed wing craft at an altitude between the 12 and 15,000 foot range. We start this tour at the bottom left of the flight plan and then north towards Marfa. There are at least 4 kinds of lines found on the Marfa Plateau. The dark lines are the most easily located, and you can see those on Google Earth. Some of the lines are used as fence line markers. Vast majority are not. I think they might be connectors of some sort. Road type lines all have the same width and apparently cut through quartz deposits without any explosives or detritus. The third type are the scratch type lines, and they could easily be dismissed, but upon closer examination are integral in the geoglyphs themselves. But easily, the most curious and interesting are the raised lines, and they may indicate some kind of cabling or piping just under the surface of the soil. And if I zoom in a little bit, you can see it just looks like a mound leading off into nowhere. Now this will start in the approximate area where we left off in. This I call the Pyramid Book area. And just south of that is where we left off, near a connector area. And you can see this is fenced in, but then the lines connecting to it are part of the soil. And the coloring of the soil is amazing. Especially when viewed on very clear days. It's striking, actually. There are different colors of soil all over the place, different kinds of texturing, and I know that they're part of some kind of art that you can only see when you highlight these lines and look at them from a good altitude. And you can see these connectors under the soil have almost an antiquity to them. And this is in the area that we left off in of the last video. Part 6 takes us back into the majority of the plateau itself, and you can see off in the distance how big this area actually is. Now these lines, like the solar arrays, the solar geoglyphs, they're 10 miles in diameter apiece. And to give you some idea that there's 7 of those solar arrays across the Marfa Plateau itself. Now you can see these lines have a very sweeping, sometimes artful look when you're closely examining them, but they make much more sense from an altitude of about 12 to 15,000 feet. But for research purposes, yeah, helicopter is just fine because you can easily hover over areas or get to areas that you normally would not in a fixed wing. But for tourism, I suggest the 12 to 15,000 foot in a fixed wing aircraft. Now, if you look down at the bottom, there's structured areas too. And where we're going into is an area called Mitchell Flats. Mitchell Flats is a very, very important history of this area and has always shown one of the more active areas for Marfa lights, or the phantom lights that seem to come out of the ground. And the local citizens here, like me, believe that they're plasma. And you can see that these lines are not fenced in, but they exist. There's stapled areas that obviously they have no purpose other than to hold parts of the soil together, almost like a doctor would suture someone's slice in the skin. And you can see the quartz deposit. It's an incredibly hard rock, by the way. The whole area is like concrete. This couldn't possibly be done without a huge amount of mechanical industry, and there has never been any in the Marfa area. And you can see the antiquity of some of these staples. They're under the soil, and in some areas they're actually popping up like a misplaced staple, or a staple that didn't get driven quite properly. And these are not water runoffs, by the way. They're not reservoirs. And then you can see the textured areas too. Again, the staples seem to hold everything in place, not allowing the soil to move at all. And the fact that this whole area is like a quartz cap tells me that it's all conductive, and they wanted to maintain that conductivity. Again, you see the whole area of staples, and you'll also see some of these road lines have what appears to be arrow markings pointing in a particular direction, and they're actually gouges in the earth. They're not turnoffs for vehicles, as it looks like. This is Mitchell Flats, easily the most controversial place, because some people can confuse this with circular farming. This has nothing to do with circular farming. And let me show you why. When you zoom in, you'll see that there are ridged areas all through this, horizontally, vertically, and the circular part of this glyph of some sort. I just call it a spiral, simply a spiral, and I put this in my book because it is not circular farming. I can find no other circular farming that has an outline, a hard outline, that has any ridged areas at all, because circular farming requires flat, level area, and it only works for like grasses, alfalfa, anything that can be applied with a sprinkler. Now, tourism out here is, I believe, you can still get tours out to the Mitchell Flats area, but you have to go into Marfa, and there will be flyers for it. But you can see that these spiral segments are actually raised and in photography it makes it look like it's flat. But you'll notice also there are these horizontal areas too. These are not present in any other circular farming, so it's not circular farming. I believe it must be some kind of a maybe a light show, a light fountain. And it actually exhibits all four kinds of lines found in Marfa, with the raised lines obviously being very, very interesting. Now this is an actual circular farm, and I wanted you to see it. This is taken just south of the border, and you can see how everything is flat. It has to be. The irrigation is a sprinkler system that's basically driven around on a big wheel. And I'm sure if you've ever passed these, you know what I mean. This is not any good for any kind of a ridged area. It has to be flat and small furrow plowed. And none of these are outlined like this is. And the history of this place makes it even more interesting, because this is the place in Mitchell Flats, Marfa, Texas, that has a majority of the activity of the Marfa Lights Phenomena. And I just wanted to show you comparatively circular farming and this area, and why I included it in my book. There's dark lines, road lines, and you can easily see from the erosion that this place is ancient. And for note, that Texans who moved into the area, they didn't disturb anything because they didn't have to. They used what was there, and I commend them for it. That's the only reason this area has maintained this level of native naturalness, and such a shows these lines so significantly. Huge outlines, staples that obviously they have to be considered a terraforming. There's no other explanation for them. And you can see that one side of the soil is lighter than the other, and it's split exactly by the outline of a line itself. Again, dark, light, a corner piece, just like a piece of tile, and all the colors of the area. It's really remarkable when you bump up the color, which I haven't done. I wanted to present this thing in its most natural form, because this is photographic evidence of the discovery of Nazca type lines and geoglyphs in North America. And this is what I was talking about, like the arrow type markings. It shows you a way to actually follow the direction, but you would think these things are cut into the road simply to provide passage for travelers. They're not. You would not want to pull off on one of those, because they're actually gouges in the earth, and very, very, very rough. Not even four-wheel drive would get you out of those things. And over you see how huge this area is, with lines that continue for 50 to 100 miles apiece, and even farther. I've followed traces of these into New Mexico and Arizona, but nothing as spectacularly well placed and artistic as the singular area in Marfa, Texas. and it's beautifully illustrated how this would take a massive amount of work, man time, machinery, and there is absolutely no record of that. So I defy anybody who says that this is man-made. At least not in our current history, not in the history of the United States. And this area was basically just sparsely started to be lived in after 1860s. Now this is very interesting. This is obviously a foundational structure of very, very regular areas. Anybody who thinks that there's no archaeology to be done here, and you can see the size of housing, very, very tiny in comparison to the megalithic size just within reach. And until we had flight, we could not see this area properly. Now this area had a Class E FAA designated airspace, and that was a military restriction. I was able to get that declassified or reclassified into a normal airspace where people can actually go. Of course, the people who've been flying over the area weren't aware that there was any kind of restriction. So apparently they never really pressed the rules. And then you'll see different colors of stone, and they're all outlined, if not indirectly with scratch lines. And there you see, coming back up into Marfa, Texas itself, and the surrounding area where there are structured areas. This whole area is full of archaeology. These lines actually stretch into Fort Davis and Alpine itself. And I believe that textured areas also contribute to the art. Some are used as fish scales, or even as hair patterns. Obviously not fences. This would be coming up on the neck of the Marfa goat itself. There, as in earlier videos, I've shown you that over the city itself is a huge animal glyph, or multi-animal glyph, of a 2-hump camel, a goat, and a small, comparatively 2-mile-high giraffe, all together in one basic glyph over the city itself, city proper itself. And everything attaches to water functions. Water and quartz. This cannot be a coincidence. The same thing is found in Nazca, where the quartz of Nazca is actually shipped all over the world in use for computer parts. And we're finding out more and more about the actual uses of crystal. And obviously these people who built megaliths, this is again the gouges that look like arrows pointing in a particular direction to follow from one piece of art to another. Staples, water functions, colors like very, very dramatic. And there is nothing out of place. Even the vegetation seems managed. This is an area of historically minimal construction with no recorded construction anywhere, except for the Marfa Airport itself that was only in use for about 2 to 3 years during World War II. It's always maintained a very small population, I believe around 19,000, and some silver has been found in the area, but no kind of real heavy metals or material like to make it worthwhile for miners to go out and really waste this land. Everything has conspired to save this area. And fortunately, Texans themselves seem to have respected the land too, and to work with what they got. You can see out in the distance lines that stretch for miles and miles and miles. And this can only be appreciated from altitude. And this must have been a message, a way to navigate for the people who built this to other megalithic sites that are connected along the same line, like Stonehenge and like the Great Pyramid at Giza. And there's Marfa proper. Again, we're looking north would be up, south down. And these lines directly outline all of the different colored areas associated with this huge animal glyph. And there you can see some telephone poles. They don't look anything like the sutures that I've shown you. Again, these are regular areas out here in the middle of nowhere, Marfa, Texas. And nobody has bothered to go out and look at them. Human exploitation of the area started in about 1860s and did not increase by any great amount with the advent of the silver mine that was in the lower part of Terlingua, I believe, but it's in the same general area. And look at the lines, they just go miles and miles. Over hill, valley, doesn't matter. When you highlight them, they express themselves even more dramatically, becoming all sorts of figures, like the goat figure here over the city proper. And note the texture. This is another glyph. If you turn it upside down, it becomes a kind of a wolf when highlighted. And that can be found on one of my earlier videos. And the comparative soil coloration. and marked texturing. It's this is incredible. How many machines do you think were actually responsible for this? It would have to number in the hundreds, thousands maybe. And sweeping signs of outlines of eyes. And archaic ancient lines underneath. It's almost like the area was refurbished or reconditioned at a point of their ancient lines and then newer looking lines possibly above the area itself. And there you see signs of even earlier structure. And if you look at how the soil is, you can see just visually how hard it is. There's one of the staples. They all seem machined, and it has to be something metal. The soil itself is so compact and so hard that I have to believe that these lines are ancient. It's part of the camel. And I am of the opinion that if there's no record of construction being done like this, then we didn't do it. We're good at one thing, and that is keeping track of records. Unless ordered to destroy them. Lines upon lines and distance upon distance. It would easily take thousands of surveyors, crew, maybe in the millions, none of which we have any record of. And this is a beautiful area who welcomes anyone with a smiling face. Marfa is a very, very beautiful place, and I would suggest a visit. I would hope for younger people to go out and actually find more evidence, dig up the things that I couldn't dig up, and do some actual study of the area that's never been accomplished. It's worth saving, not only for Texas, but for America and the world itself. And I always know that Texas loves its privacy. So don't go out there and think that you can actually do any study without asking. This is a figure that one of the figures that I first found, I call the matriarch. And she's beautiful. And there's my new icon, dondanl channel. I thank you for your view.